This is number 2 on your review sheet. Notice that it has fractions in it, so it is a rational equation. When you have fractions, what you want to do is find the common denominator. The denominators in this problem are 2 and 4, so the common denominator between 2 and 4 would be 4. So you take the 4 and you multiply it by every single thing in the problem, which is what we've done here. And you just take the 4 and write it beside every single thing that's there. That's the easiest thing to do. Do the math now. Over here we can cancel the 2 with the 4 and we're left with a 2. 4 times 7 is 28. These 4's cancel, and over here we're left with a 2. Once we figure out what we're left with, we can do our multiplication. If we do our multiplication here, we have 2 times x, 28, 1 times x, and 19 times 2. So now we have a nice linear equation, so we can say 2x minus x is x, and bring the 28 to the other side. And if we do that, we're left with x equals 10. I cannot stress enough that you should probably make sure you check all of your answers, especially some of the harder rational equations. Some of these equations, especially if they have variables underneath them, if you put your answer in and there ends up being a 0 in the denominator, then your answer cannot be a solution to the problem. If you have a subtraction problem, you want to make sure that you draw brackets if you have anything on the top, like x plus 5 or anything like that. When you get to this part at the top, if there had been like maybe an x plus 5 or something like that, you would want to draw a bracket around that part so that you get your sign right. So make sure you're taking care of those things when you do those problems. This one is number 5 on your review sheet. Notice that it's a little different. It has a square in the problem, and every time you're trying to solve and you have a square, you could use the quadratic formula if you wanted to. Some of you messed up when you typed in your formula, so I want to make sure that you know that this is the formula. Make sure you have the correct formula written down. I've separated it out so that you know that A is 2, B is 8, and C is negative 15. They're just the coefficients in your quadratic equation. That's what you plug into the quadratic formula. Once you know A, B, and C, all you do now is plug those in. Now here I've actually plugged my numbers into my formula. Notice that I have used parentheses here, especially where the B goes, because if you have a negative B and you're plugging that in, if you punch it into your calculator, you will get the wrong sign if you do not use parentheses. So you should always use parentheses when you're doing this problem. Notice we do our math here, and inside the radical, we have 64 plus 120, which will be a positive number. If the number inside the radical is a negative, you can stop and say no real solution. That means that the solutions would be imaginary. If it's positive, we will have 2 real solutions. If it's a 0, we will end up with just 1 solution. So right now we're going to have 2 real solutions. So we have to do our math now. Notice when I did the math inside, I got 184. So over here in the little green box, I took 184 and I did a factor tree with it. Once I factored everything down, I noticed that I have 2 2's. Anytime you have 2 of something, you can pull it to the outside of the radical. If you have more than one number, you multiply those numbers. So here we're going to pull a 2 out, and we're going to leave 2 and 23 inside the radical. So now our problem looks like this. Notice I've pulled the 2 out, I've left the 2 and the 23 inside, and I've multiplied them. Now, you should reduce these if you can, and since 8 and 2 and 4 all have something in common, I can reduce those by 2. If you take a look at this, 2 goes into 8 4 times, that's where the 4 came from. 2 goes into 2 once, and we don't have to write ones. And 2 goes into 4 twice. This is the final answer in its reduced form, but I can also put it in my calculator and get a decimal. That's what's here in the red box. This one is number 4 on your test review. It's also quadratic because it has a square, so you could multiply everything out and use the quadratic formula. But this one also has things in it that are perfect squares. 16 has a square root, x minus 5 squared has a square root, and 9 has a square root. So what we would want to do first is move the 9 to the other side. and then take the square root of both sides. Now you have to be careful here because the square root of 16x minus 5 squared is actually 4 times x minus 5. And the square root of 9 is actually plus 3 and minus 3. We use both of those problems. We set 4x minus 20, I've just distributed, equal to 3, and 4x minus 20 equal to negative 3. And we solve both of those problems. Looking at the rest of the work, we brought the 20 to the other side over here, gotten 23, divided both sides by 4. Over here, I brought the 20 to the other side, got 17, and divided both sides by 4. These are my two answers. You should always check your answers and make sure they make sense.